So we can see some issues with the ground here. I guess I didn't attach it as well. Yeah, these parts weren't touching the ground. That's fine, I suppose. It'll be harder to deal with, but that's fine. I'm just going to select all these and then, change my selection method back and delete those. So now this base has been trimmed to fit the ground around it. And as you can see from the inside, it fits pretty perfectly. The only problem is we still have borders. And that's not good. So you want to select the borders on the wall's edge and expand those. So I'm going to go over to here. It's hard to get only the wall's borders. There we go. Those are the wall's borders. So what I'm going to do is expand the borders on the walls just a tiny bit. Let's try by like 99.9%. No, too low. Okay, you can use these to edit them. Edit their size is very small. Okay. Then I'm going to go back here because I see the problem with this one since I didn't intersect it with the ground correctly. I'm going to pull this back. Strangely angled. I see the problem. Yeah, it's definitely strangely angled. You can see this edge right here. This whole polygon is wrong, so I'm going to delete that one because it's facing wrong. Interesting. There's a very frustrating edge right here. It seems I'm going to have to leave it about here because of the way it's attached to the walls here. So that's fine, I suppose. And let's just see where it starts. Right here. Okay, we'll leave it right there. Our goal was basically to create this little gap between the two, because as you might have predicted, we're going to select two parts of a gap and bridge them together. Now, did that really save us time over creating our own geometry using the stitching techniques, using Polygon Create? Yeah. Yeah, it really did. Imagine, if you will, here we have let's click out of there. Let's go to our polygon and then create. Okay, we have two vertexes here. We have two vertexes here. How would you like to have to move back and forth every time you click? Or try to do it surgically from 1,000,000 miles away? Or try to do it from here, where you have these two, that one, that, and no vertex over here to connect it to. So you have to go all the way back to over here. So being able to connect it by edge is a huge help. Okay, we're gonna do this technique to one more thing before we move on, and that is to a pillar. Or I was originally gonna do a pillar, but I'm gonna do a different object this time. Let's do a not a sphere because I don't want to deal with the problems. Let's deal with a pyramid. Sure. You guys get to have a little pyramid in your base. No, actually, that's way too easy. It does need to be circular. Okay, how about a torus? But I don't want it to be a whole torus, because that's going to be weird in the map. How about an arc torus? So like this. So I'm going to convert this to a mesh and then delete half the polygons in it. There we go. Something like this would be a nightmare to put into most maps in a flat surface, because if you look at our surface right here, there are no extra polygons here. We didn't tessellate it. So in order to put it in, we'd have to attach it, destroy this ground, and then rebuild it by creating from one vertex to here. You get the point. I don't like that. So what we're going to do is the old binomial trick. Take the whole object, move it down here, make sure backface cull is on before we try anything. Compound objects, Boolean, union, pick operand B. You'll see it disappeared anyway. That's interesting, I find. I'm going to reseed it. Oh, I did make it a mesh. But this is a poly. Make sure they're the same thing. Sorry. So if you have a mesh and a poly, it's going to freak out. Just make sure they're both the same thing here. Or actually, let's turn this back into a mesh rather than change that into a poly. There. Okay. And now we can apply a Boolean and join them together. So yeah, make sure they're both meshes before you try a Boolean. And that's going to freak out parts of the map when it's trying to do it, but for the most part, our ground is still one piece, basically. There's no messed up geometry or anything like that. Let's go over to it. Let's go underground and see how we did here. We want to delete these parts right here, so let's convert the whole thing back into a poly. I think an easier way would be to unselect it, or deselect it rather, using my paint here. So I only have those selected, and then delete those, and everything else is good. Okay. Go to border for each of these. Expand the border out a little bit. This is a bit... Oh, I have all the borders selected. That's a mistake. Let's have... yeah, see. So with back facing gone, I'm trying to select the ground border. Which is unfortunate because they really are right next to each other. So you know what? I'm going to leave that as it is. I'm just going to shrink down this border a little bit. And you can see it looks like they're already connected. That's not true. Shrink down that border. Ah, that one I was able to select the border too. Okay. Doesn't really matter for our purposes right now, as long as they're both like that. So I'm going to leave that like there. Now I'm going to select those, go back to paint, get off the scale function, and you can link these together about 2 at a time, as long as you don't have this third thing. There we go. So I'm just going to go around selecting 2 at a time. And just quickly bridge them together. And why is it 2 at a time? Because bridge freaks out when you try going 3. See, it's terrible. So do it 2 at a time. And by 2, I don't mean like 2, like these are 2, but I mean 2 corresponding, whatever, edges. And if it's still freaking out, then yeah, go to a different amount. And check with here, with your wireframe, or in this case I have edged faces on, so that's up here, by the way, edged faces. So I can see the wireframe at all times. So I don't know, this ended up being 4 edges, so it ended up being messed up no matter what I tried. So I still had to do just the adjacent edges at a time. But you can see this works, and it's a lot faster than going vertex by vertex. Let's go over here and do that. And there we go. We now have a base that looks like that. Let me take off edged faces so that you can actually see. We now have a base that looks like that, with a weird old thing sticking out of the ground that looks like that. How about we add some cliffs, shall we? Select the walls. Let's tessellate those a little bit. I actually don't see tessellation on a poly, so I'm going to go back to a mesh. You'll see the walls keep changing. Oh no, not this time. That's good. Okay, so walls are selected. I'm not going to... sure, actually, let's mess with the back. So back wall. Alright, I'm just going to tessellate these a little bit. Actually, let's tessellate them face center. And you'll see it gives this nice cliffish kind of thing already. I'm going to go to a vertex. I'm just going to pull these in. Now, I said I'm going to make this an indoor map, so I'm not going to make these like cliff walls, but they're going to be more like cave walls. I'm not sure if there's a huge difference to that, but you'll see I'm just pulling in these vertexes towards the map. This is a very quick way of making cliff walls. There are better ways, but that's just really quick. Let's go over here. This is where we're going to put our tunnel, but I'm going to show you something in a moment as to how I'm going to build that tunnel instead of tessellating the entire wall. So before we do that, there's one last important thing that you need to know. Errors. There's going to be errors. There's going to be a lot of errors that you're going to encounter, and they're going to frustrate you. But I'm going to go over really quick how to deal with them and how to find them early on. So we just did a bunch of stuff, a huge amount of stuff. So I'm guessing there might be an error or two in here. So let's select everything. Let's go back to poly for a moment. The first thing you're going to want to do to find errors is visually inspect anything that looks weird. This part looks weird, but you can turn it and you can see it actually looks fine. So that's fine. And all the edges look sealed to me. So that's the first thing, is visually inspecting. The next thing you can try is turning it to a poly, clicking border, and then pressing Control A. Remember how I said that borders were all around any open place? So if you select anything when you do Control A, oops, it's Control S, Control A, and something gets selected, that's bad, and you got to deal with it. But as you can see, we have no open borders, so no problem. Convert it back. Select everything. Just because there are no open borders, there are other ways of having errors. So let's go down to STL check right here in your modify drop-down list. I want it to check for everything. I'm getting better at this. There are no errors. Now, why would I expect there to be errors? I've dealt with a map with over 2,000 errors before. If you get errors, don't freak out about it. You can solve them pretty easily. So it's just kind of a rule of thumb. You're going to probably expect, especially with some, you saw me do all this kind of stuff to this map, you might expect some errors. And what do I mean by this? Double face is pretty easy to make. I'll show you. Let's say you're happily moving along, creating your geometry, right? And let's say you do something like this. Oh, hey, I think it'd be awesome if I put a triangle right here. There's already a triangle there. There's no reason to put that. So what happens when you do something like that? Control A, check. You're going to get 5 errors just for that one thing. So like I said, when I had over 2,000, something like this causes 5. You delete that one polygon, you're going to be down 5 errors. So don't freak out if you have a huge amount of errors. Don't worry about it. Well, worry about it, but don't sit there going, oh no, I've completely ruined my map. Just delete that, and the errors are gone. I ended up thinking that was a double face. That was probably a multiple edge because it ended up not being created on the same plane. So let's create a double face. That was a multiple edge because 2 edges were being shared by that triangle. This edge and this edge were both being shared by more than 2 shapes at a time, and that's not good. So a double face rather. Let's go over to something. Let's do this triangle because this one looks easiest. I'm going to create a polygon in the opposite direction on the same vertexes as that. And now you see, even though technically all my normals on one side are facing inward, I now have this. And you wouldn't believe how common this would be if you created all your own polygons, which is again why I don't really like doing that method unless I absolutely have to. I like welding vertices, except sometimes that can mess with the geometry. I like bridging a lot. I don't like cap holes. I don't know if I already mentioned it, but I've never gotten that to export correctly. The cap holes or cap holes modifier, you might have seen it or might have heard about it. I never got it to work ever in Halo, so I don't cap holes except manually. Anyway, you're going to see now this is a double face error. And it's also going to complain about multiple edges because, like I said, I created it on the same thing. So now we have 5 errors. Again, 5 errors that can be solved just by deleting. Oops. Remember, everything's selected when you have STL check on. Just delete that. Again, 5 errors gone. So let's see, what else is there? There's spike. This is another pretty easy one to simulate. Huh. Spike is not what I thought it was. Well, regardless, this is one of the cases I was about to talk about next, but I suppose I could talk about right now. There are some errors that STL check will not detect, but Halo Tool will. and those are really, really annoying to fix. I thought that was spike. I really did. I guess there are other spikes. Open edge is kind of obvious. Multiple edge I went over. I'm going to have to look up and post what spike is because it wasn't what I assumed it was. But regardless, it's something that once you identify it, you'll be able to fix. And you saw when there was an error, I'm just going to delete this vertex. I'm going to have to undo it, but there we go. When there was an error, STL check will highlight the nearest polygons where that error occurred. So the bottom one's hard to see because it's so tiny, but you might be able to see the red highlight there. That makes it even more obvious in wireframe. And so you go 3 errors for one open edge. You go, okay, these 3 are the errors. The error must be this. And of course it is. Now everything's back to normal. So we went over visually inspect your model because I guess it's a perfect example. Stuff like this isn't detected by the error checking that we have. STL stands for stereolithography, for those of you who know, and we aren't really doing that in Halo. However, it does work very nicely for picking out some of the most common errors. I'm gonna delete that modifier. So for stuff that the check doesn't work out, the border check doesn't work out, your visual check doesn't work out, there's one last step. It's actually not something I can replicate very easily, I think, without having an issue. Not very helpful error. You'll see in your Halo directory, we now have this .wrl file. That's going to require a change out of me because I use a 64-bit version of 3D Studio Max. If you have 32-bit version, you're good. If you have 64-bit version, you have to download the 32-bit version to use .wrl files. Luckily, I've done that. I'll save this as gin. We'll see. Okay, let's open our gin. The Mass FX, okay. I don't remember Mass Effects. Mass Effect, good game, buy it, whatever. We have our thing open. Genuinely do not know what that Mass Effect was that it didn't like, but whatever. It's not a big deal. I'm also gonna fix this edge right here because it's just bugging me. Genuinely. It's just not... whatever. We'll go over smoothing and fixing stuff like that later because it's not something that's too easy to fix without ripping it apart. Let's stay on point. Go to fix this. Let's go to our import. Go to your Halo Custom Edition directory and import this RAW file. Do not reset the scene. Create primitives is up to you. That means, do you want to create shapes on the scene? I do. That doesn't matter. And so what it did was it imported a shape that was the problem. And you'll see it has 19 entities selected if you press the H key. This is why I really don't like rural. This is how many shapes it took just to create this one triangle. I mean, kinda seriously unnecessary. But that's interesting how it thinks that still exists. Oh, this whole thing is considered Taurus. Okay. So Taurus is our actual level. Master Chief's there, that's there, which means everything that isn't these 3 has been imported in the .wrl file. So if we select those, if we accidentally deselected it somehow, it's bright red and intersecting all our geometry, so it's kind of hard to miss, unless of course we had a I don't know, bright red map. I'm realizing this is from the texture, so let's just to exemplify my point a bit more. Okay, there. So let's say you had a bunch more errors instead of one, and you're like, okay, where's the error? Just press H to get to your hierarchy. Select all these, and you'll see it even happened to select parts of here. That's actually interesting to me. We'll see about that. I don't know about that right there. You get to see a live error checking here. No errors STL. Maybe I have stumbled upon an actual magical... Okay, everything is mesh, yeah. I've stumbled upon an actual undetectable error. This is great for the tutorial, I suppose. Okay, let's import this new .wrl. Aha, so everything else was fine, but it's saying these are bad. So I'm gonna go ahead and fix these. Exports out well. And there we go. There we go. So, error solving. We all got to do it. If I was building this a bit better, it wouldn't have happened the way it did. I definitely thought the bomb was going to have some kind of problems. I didn't think it was going to have that many. But as you can see, now that we have this is just awesome. This means it worked. And we can start playing around with this weird looking map. No base yet, but I could easily, now that we've solved all those errors, I could easily go into this thing, select, click on the back here, and extrude that. I have to put back facing, there we go. I could extrude this all the way back and start making a base in here. And because I'm just extruding that face, it won't cause any more errors that I can imagine. So let's do something like that, shall we? We're going to start working a little bit more with editable polys, since this is such a long tutorial, for those of you watching the main tutorial. We're going to start into an entire new map using those hallway merging techniques. So now we have our base over here, goes through a tunnel, comes out to another base on the other side. And here's where I was going to do some more about editable polys. I said I was going to put a tunnel into this wall here, but I figure this will be a bit more impressive. I just thought of it. If we were to put a tunnel into the tunnel, we're going to do that, of course, by going editable poly. Let's go to edge, or actually polygon rather. And the first tactic we're going to use is called insetting. If you click inset and then click on here like any other tool, you'll see you get a smaller square within that polygon. You can use this along with extrude to get some nice effects. And if you click on these in edit poly mode, if you click on these little boxes, you get exact amounts, and they're really nice to adjust. What I find is really cool about that is if you want to have really precise work, you can click over here now. Click on that options box and it copies it right over there. So now I have two that are exactly the same, except for the fact that I insetted this side twice. So let's inset that side once by 5. And this side once by 5. Now we have 2 copies. Now it's not going to change how the tunnel looks, but it is changing the geometry. So here I'm going to select these 2 things we just insetted, and I'm going to bevel these. Let's bevel them into each other, and let's bevel them backward. So it's going to look like this. Oh, I can't deselect it, otherwise it'll stop. But then I'm going to click OK. And you can see we've now inset this nice little pattern into our wall pretty easily. I'm going to try to get out of the shadows here. And I thought that'd be pretty cool to show off. Now over here, let's do some more stuff with our tools here. We just did inset and bevel. We know about bridge, we know about extrude. Outline won't really work too well on this. It basically just makes a bigger version of that polygon. Like I said, it's not going to work too well for this tunnel. So let's leave it like that. Actually, I'm kind of thinking it might cause errors, but I kind of like the way it looks. So I'm going to make it bigger, but then I'm going to raise it up a bit so that's more level with the tunnel. So what I've basically just done is I've taken that part of the tunnel, made it bigger using outline, and now I can extrude this into another part. So let's go ahead and do that actually. This is a massive difference from what we've done so far. Usually it's really short and here you go, here's your map. Really simple kind of stuff, right? But this is map making. This is what happens when you get to more advanced stuff. And obviously you don't need to do all the stuff that I'm doing in order to make a good map or make your map. Just pick and choose whatever tactics I'm using and adjust appropriately. But right now I am making a full map from start to finish just to give you an idea of what could possibly happen. Error solving, adjustments, decorations, all that kind of stuff. Here's a new type of intersection right here. How are we going to get this in here? They're not binomial or anything like that, so how are we supposed to break it up? Well, we're going to use some more. We're still in Edit Poly, so we're going to use some more of that connection tool. We're going to give it 2 segments, and this time we can adjust the pinch because it's all on one polygon. Let's move it over here some. And then I'm going to connect these 2 lines with 1 segment. I'm going to slide that down here to near where the top of the tunnel is. You can also just move it when you're done. Okay, we have these 2 polygons here. I've never done this before, so you're in for a treat when it doesn't or does work. That does work. Awesome. You can bridge 2 polygons together, and it does something a bit like that. The opening's not square, but we can fix that soon enough. Just take this and drag it. And take this and drag it. And there we go. We have a little back tunnel going from this base to over here. And we do want to copy that, although maybe not super symmetrically. So let's take over here. This tunnel, I don't know how fair it is. I don't know how long this tunnel is compared to that. That's kind of what happens when you make a map really fast, but I don't know. I don't know. This looks, well, I do know, because this is finished. We have gone over extrude, weld, target welds, just weld, clicking on one, then dragging to the other. Chamfer, bridge, connect. I've never had to use this, although I assume it's simple. Self-explanatory, I mean. We've gone over searching for open areas using the border. We've gone over flipping normals, insets, outlines, extrudes, all these. Is there anything I missed? Chamfers? No. So let's change this whole thing back to a mesh. Select everything. Give it an old check. No STL errors. I love to hear that. Delete this. I'm not sure if leaving it on matters. I just don't like to. Select everything. Like I said, I'm not going to concern myself with materials, but I do want to make sure they all are set to something. Otherwise, I'll get an error for exporting. They are. Since I keep joining and rejoining, I always make sure it's linked to the frame again. Let's export this data. Gen. Yes, I want to replace it. Export looks like it's working out fine. Now for the moment of truth. It likes it. It really does. Okay. I'm going to speed along to our map in Sapien, where I'll go over lighting it and then getting this final product out there. So what I've basically done here is I had an old light I had made before called work light here. And this is actually not a light fixture device. This is just a scenery that has lights attached to it. It could use some work, but what I basically built this thing for was seeing inside of an indoor map without a sky. So you can see how after I put them in the map and then run radiosity, the place gets lit up. So I'm going to put one right here just to show you. It's not going to give off light until I run radiosity. And because I put so many, it's going to take some time here. So here we go. Here's our indoor map. These work lights are for being able to see as you're working in Sapien. I'm going to put a link to them so you can download them if you want. That's completely up to you, and it's completely optional. But now that these work lights are up, I can put stuff like, I can go find a light fixture like this bright ceiling, and I'm just going to toss it on here. Now that I can see, I can clearly see that how it looks, and I'm going to place it like that. I'll put another one here, stuff like that. Since there are two bases, I'm actually just going to leave it like this for now. So this is going to be the base with the lights. It's easier to notice. But there you go.
Slayer.
Okay, so here we are in our indoor map. And I'd say it's working. Gonna flee into the tunnels here. Luckily I have a flashlight. Oh geez, these guys. Ooh. Okay. So I think I'm gonna put up a version of this with some actual weapons around so that you can fight them off. You know, grenades, pistols, stuff like that. I'm going to put it up in the description as well, link to that as well. But as you saw in just, I know it was a 2-part video, but I really wanted to cover, all the possible ways you can change a level around so you can really make what you want. And as you can see, just a little modification to what your level looks like. Some AI, which I will be teaching later on. And you got yourself a really interesting map to play around with. Now, of course, this isn't actually that interesting to look at, but I like how they really use the tunnels, stuff like that. I do believe there's one last section, a little bonus section. For this final part, what we're going to be doing is drawing out a map. So instead of going from a box and then extruding it and splitting it and doing all that, you can just start from a weird shape that you draw yourself. So let's go to shapes here and then line. And let's make some kind of weird shape here. When you click first, you're going to create a point. When you click next, you're going to create another point, and you can click and drag that point to create a curve here. So let's create some sort of weird thing. So let's make a neck shape here. Yeah, totally some kind of thing here. Yeah. And now when you're done, go ahead and convert this to an editable mesh. And you'll see it automatically fills in some kind of flat shape. Gonna select this polygon and then extrude it. .100's kind of small. I don't know. Maybe it is. And then with the top still selected, you want to clone it by shift and dragging with the movement thing and move it all the way down to the bottom and clone it to an element. Can use wireframe here to align it well. Now remember we did a bunch of vertices welding in the past. So what we have here is two symmetric things, so that's going to work out just perfectly. Go to your vertex selection, select all the vertices, and then weld them by some kind of small amount, smaller than the height of the level. And so our level was 100, so this should work out well. And check the bottom here. If we control Z, we can't really see them weld together. Now we can. Okay, so you see all the bottoms here. We weld. Weld them by, okay, they changed, I guess. Let's weld them by 30. It's still less than 100. And there you go. Now you have this weird shape. What you can do is take it, flip it, back face call, and the last thing you need to do is fix the floor, because the floor is going to be the wrong normal. And you have yourself this weird old base. I could probably make this base as well using this method, but I actually find extruding it works out a bit better, because it just does for all these shapes. I might draw the tunnels though, because I could get more control over the tunnels, but everything else, since they're all boxy, I think I would still do the same way about. So there you go, how to draw out a map. This is a great method for if you want to do something really specific, like let's say you wanted to make a maze. Well, that maze would be pretty annoying to do extruding. Actually, maybe not, but still. If you wanted to draw some kind of weird shape, like this halo. For instance, hello. This would be really annoying to try to do extruding. You could still certainly do it, especially since all the edges are square. But seeing as how you can pretty much instantly make it however you want, compared to having to extrude it through tunnels, I think this method is pretty helpful. Of course, when you start welding the vertices at the bottom, if you have a particularly tight curve, like let's say you do something like this, do, and then you were to weld, besides this being a really difficult and small map, besides it being wrong in a couple ways, because the vertices are so close together at some points, you might end up welding those together. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this kind of work. Scale is even more important when it comes to these kind of maps, because when you weld the bottom to the top, you don't want to weld the sides to each other. So just make sure they're appropriate. These things are appropriate size apart. You can click and drag, remember, if you want a curve. You don't have to do a bunch of things to make a curve. So yeah, we have all of our techniques over here, drawing over here, a little word of warning. I think that covers everything on our basic map making for now. It was a big tutorial. Hope you were able to stick through it. Next time we're going to cover some more specific stuff like scenery. We're going to move on to sounds and AI and all sorts of really awesome stuff to decorate your level. But this was basically the biggest one. If you can master all the things I've shown you in this level, in this lesson, then you can basically make anything you want, really. So if you think you already have everything I've just shown you down, which was a lot, then I'm going to start moving on to both beginner and intermediate tutorials at the same time, show you a couple more tools you can use besides the normal Halo editing kit, and really get you started on making weapons, vehicles, and all that kind of stuff to really customize your map and make it your own. But until then, good luck, good modding, and hope to see you next time.